Okay, we should start seeing populating.
Okay, welcome everyone to our industry speaker series. Very, very excited for tonight. I know there's still people that are populating, and we'll let you trickle into the room. But this is a big night for us here at UND, and I really think it's going to be a super informative night for all of you. We have some of the, in my opinion, the best people you can possibly get to come and talk to us about what's going on in the industry right now. And before I introduce our first speaker, a lot of you know me here at the university. I come from a very strong ALPA background. My father was a continental striker. I go way, way back. I got to tell you, through all this turmoil right now, I want you to think about one thing. You know, there's a lot of things going on in the news. We see lots of information about bailouts and whatnot. But the question I have for everyone watching is, who is singularly focused on the employees right now? Who is watching out? You know, we've really learned a lot of things from the bailout after 9/11. And all I can say is thank God we've had ALPA here to really help the industry, because if we didn't have these folks here, and others as well, there's other labor unions that are helping, but by and large, the heavy lifting right now, in my opinion, is being done by ALPA. And if we didn't have them looking out for the industry right now, it would look dramatically different today. There'd be a lot of people at home, a lot of people wondering when they're going to get their jobs back. So I just want everyone to keep that in mind. And as we go forward, we've got what I would call an all-star panel here. Like I said, I'm very, very excited for this. The first of which is Captain DePete, who is the president of ALPA. And it's been a while since we've had the president of ALPA come up and visit UND. And this is really, really exciting. Captain DePete has been very, very busy in the media, talking, representing the employee interests, but he's also someone that's probably talked to every CEO in the industry, you know, within a very short period of time. So if you're looking for the one singular source of somebody that's talked to pretty much everyone that you can talk to, it's Captain DePete. And with that, I'll throw it over to you, Captain DePete. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I am so impressed with the number of people that I'm seeing coming on here. It's a good thing you did this on Thursday, because I remember when I was in school, no way would this have worked on a Friday night. So thank you very much for taking the time to come here and talk. And I think this is a really good time to have this talk, considering everything that's going on right now. And, you know, first thing I just wanted to say is, you know, UND and I and ALPA go way back, right? I mean, we've been doing this for quite some time now. The accident investigation course that we host up there, that you host up there, is second to none. I mean, it sells out constantly. But, you know, the great thing about the connection here is that for 89 years, right, focus of the Airline Pilots Association has been on scheduled with safety, right? Safety and security is our primary concern. We have 63,000 members, and hopefully some of you out there will all be members as well, at 35 airlines in the United States and Canada. And a lot of people don't know, but we are the largest pilots union in the world. We also operate the largest non-governmental safety organization in the world as well. So really proud to take part in this webcast and sit here and answer your questions. And I'd love to open it up here in a little bit once all the speakers have had a chance to talk. But we're very proud to be part of UND through the ACE Club and the memorandum of understanding that we have with you all. And, you know, just keep up the good work. You're one of our rock stars in all the LOAs that we have with all the universities. So it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I know that in, you know, we've gone from the early days of when you had a Navion Rangemaster, I think a 4-seat low-wing piston aircraft, as part of this accident investigation course. We've graduated now, and we're part of my former carrier, FedEx, right? The 727. I know I have flown that airplane. I looked at my logbook. I have proof, okay? So I am that old that I actually flew a 727 in all 3 seats. So I can tell you, I know everything there is about that airplane. I think it's totally ingrained in my brain for the rest of my life. Any other airplane I've ever stepped foot in afterwards, I still reflect back to my time on the 727. So, okay, so I'm sure you have a lot of questions about what's going on right now, and you should. The COVID-19 crisis is probably one of the greatest challenges I think we've faced in the airline industries. But I want to tell you something. We're going to get through this. In the interim, though, what's going to be particularly important is that and that's what I've been doing all day. I was telling everybody here before you all signed on that I actually had 27 interviews today, television interviews, in about a 7.5 hour time frame. And what I was focusing on was the need for the FAA to make mandatory the CDC guidelines, because right now they've only made them suggested, right? Recommended. That doesn't work with the pandemic, because what you end up happening is what we're seeing today, is that there's a varying patchwork of varying levels of compliance. And when you're dealing with a pandemic, that makes no sense whatsoever, because the virus does not understand that you're doing well in one area and doing very poorly in the other. It just doesn't work that way. So I've been trying to impress upon everyone the need, and now hopefully Congress, to get involved and compel the FAA to do its job as the regulator. Now, I want to talk a little bit about collectively bargained agreements for a little while, because when you become part of ALPA, we have you in every regard in terms of your profession and your personal life and your health, everything, anything associated with what you do and how you do it. Flying airplanes is what we take care of that. In fact, we go a step further. When I started my term here as president, I focused on the dignity of work, right? And unionism is a part of that, right? Because it's all about safety and security, building a stronger safety culture. So it's very important that dignity of your work is foremost in our minds whenever we deal with anything to do with our careers. And honestly, the way to do that is through strong collectively bargained agreements, because without agreement and buy-in from both sides, both labor and management, really it's just talk, right? There's no connection there in terms of any follow through, and basically a contract guarantees that both parties agree on certain principles and then follow through and execute on those principles. So we've got you on that as well. Our response to the COVID crisis has been nothing short, in my view, as stellar. We're doing everything that we can do. I wake up every morning and I go through my Trinity. My Trinity is, I don't want any more pilots to die. I don't want any more pilots to be exposed to the virus. And I certainly want to protect our jobs. So I've been in dialogue with the FAA, obviously frustrated with them and their inability to step up and lead in this situation, but also the President of the United States, the industry itself. And now I'm going to Congress to get help there. So I want to talk about the fact that it was ALPA that was very instrumental. I don't know if you're familiar with the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act that was just picked up. We gave $61 billion of economic stabilization for the airline industry with strong worker protections, I might add. And if it wasn't for ALPA, those worker protections would have never been in there. So we put our money where our mouth is. And during that time period, I know some of the people that are on this call with me can attest that we sent over 167,000 letters and tweets to Capitol Hill to make clear that airline pilots expect a worker share in any government relief provided to our airlines. So we've got that, that's laid out now, and we're just going to have to, move on and go to the next stage, which is going to be in phase 4 of a Stabilization Act, and we're working on that as well. So basically, I want to open it up to you and during the Q&A and hear what you have to say and hear your concerns, because I'm going to tell you something. It may not look in the short term, it may look challenging, but if you're part of aviation, you've got to kind of get used to this cycle. It can be a bit challenging at times, all right? The airline industry is integral to the health of our economy. It's integral. We've got pilots in my old airline at FedEx. They're flying in and out of Guangzhou, China, taking much needed emergency equipment like ventilators and masks and gloves back and forth here to the United States to give to our frontline healthcare workers and to our hospitals. We're moving passengers, and we're moving what's left of the economy at this point. So we are essential workers. There's no question about it. In an airline, when you come into the airlines, you just got to get in your head, you are an essential worker and you're doing an essential job. And our members are doing that with courage that you just wouldn't believe. So looking forward to working more again on phase 4 to really power this recovery that I see coming down the road. And that's the good news. The good news is in the short term, not so good, but in the long term, you're looking good. This is a great career. If I was in your shoes, I would do it all over again, and I would do it the same way. We're looking at a time now, especially as you're coming in, where old guys like me are going to be gone. Okay, we're going to be retiring in huge numbers. The numbers keep going up over the years, as you know, in the near future. And it's just going to be, once we find a way to deal with this virus, whether it's through some type of vaccine, you're going to be in really good shape, and it's going to be right back where we left off. So I feel very confident in that, and it's very hard for me to not, or to hide my passion for flying. It's something that I have always loved to do. It's just the most fantastic career. I'm not a 9-to-5 person like I'm locked into doing right now. And I'd say, let's not call it 9 to 5. Let's call it 4:30 a.m. to whenever it ends each day. But I'm very privileged to have culminated my career in having this unique opportunity right now. So I don't want to talk too long, which I know I normally do sometimes, because I'm so excited about sharing with you about everything that ALPA does. And know this one thing though, and because this is very important, as professionals, right, as all pilots being professionals, we know that we are extremely well trained. We know that we are the last arbiters of safety when we go to fly airplanes. We decide whether, as pilots in command, whether or not we're going to take an airplane or not. But I want you to know also that we take care of the human side as well at our union. Through our pilot assistance program and professional development groups and things like that. When you need help, we circle the wagons. And I think that's a true testament to an organization. I always said that you can judge the character of an organization by the way it comes to its members in need. And I'm very proud of that. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to the moderator, and I'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Very excited to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Captain DePete. And just a real quick note, I know Amy's going to go next. And Amy, I didn't know if you want to load something up while you get that ready with the share screen. I just want to let everyone know a couple different notes here. I forgot to mention at the beginning, there is a Q&A button that you should all see. Feel free to use that to type in your questions. I see a couple of you have already done that. That's great. And then secondly, we've just been made aware we might be having, unfortunately, some bandwidth issues here at UND. So I know some people are probably trying to get in right now. If you know, we're going to record this, so it'll be available in entirety as well on our YouTube channel. But bear with us. If for some reason we do have a bandwidth issue, just hang on there and we'll do our best to get everything back up and running. But so far, so good. So with that, Amy.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Higgins. Welcome, or I should say thank you, and it's nice to meet you, the University of North Dakota. My name is Amy L. Perry, and I'm a senior economic analyst at ALPA. A little bit of my bio. I am an Embry-Riddle graduate. I have a Bachelor of Science degree, a BS degree from Embry-Riddle, and a master's degree in applied economics from American University. I am fortunate to work in ALPA's Economic and Financial Analysis Department. It's a great department. And tonight, we're going to give you a little bit of a background from the past 7, 8, 9 weeks, the impact of the coronavirus. I'm going to give you a little bit of an update on the passenger industry, the cargo industry, and what the future looks like. I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet. But basically, the IMF is stating that the global economy will experience its worst recession since the Great Depression. In 2020, the world is predicted, they are predicting that the world will go down GDP of negative 3% growth, and that the United States will go down about 6%. US GDP did fall in the first quarter. I know a few weeks ago we were in one of the seminars there, the final results weren't in, but now we have noticed that there's a negative almost 5% drop in the GDP. The gross domestic product is how we basically test the health of a nation. And so as you can see, going into this pandemic, we had positive GDP growth, and we also had a pretty decent airline financial profitability picture. Now, first quarter, we contracted almost 5%. As you can see from this chart, after or during the Great Recession of 2007, we actually contracted 4 consecutive quarters in a row. And to compare that to 9/11, we had one quarter of where we contracted, and that was like basically a negative 2%. The Congressional Budget Office projects that the economy will experience a sharp contraction in the second quarter, like almost 40%. But then they're predicting that the GDP will grow in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. And every time you study the gross domestic product, you also pretty much take a look at the unemployment rate. They are stating that the second quarter unemployment figures are probably going to go up to 14% with a peak at 16%. Now, I should mention that other analysts on Wall Street are predicting this as well. Their numbers are pretty much the same. Like for the GDP, they're predicting the negative of like 35%. And for the unemployment, instead of 16% unemployment, they're predicting like 15%. So it's looking pretty scary. The passenger industry, domestic net sales are down almost 100%. As you can see towards March and April, and actually in April, it went down negative, like below 100%. International net sales were down like 116% during this same time frame. And you have to ask yourself, like, how can you get below 100%? And that's basically because all the refunds are part of the calculation. And the airlines were basically refunding more money than they were bringing in. The Transportation Security Administration has a COVID-19 website that's actually pretty interesting to get information from. We're down about 4 to 5% of where we were in 2019 for total traveler throughput. As you can see here on the left, the blue, of course, is 2019, and the red is 2020. Oh, to really put this in perspective, United Airlines, the first 2 weeks of April, flew a total of 200,000 passengers, and in 2019, during that same time frame, they flew about 6 million. So that's putting it in perspective. Right here, the TSA also has told us basically on around April 14th, I guess, we pretty much hit the bottom for the total traveler throughput. Where you could see an upswing here. So, I mean, we want to say that things are looking up, but we have to remember that the average from April 1st through today, I think the statistics here are through May 5th, are the average is 116,000. And that compares with the average last year of the same time of about 2.3 million. And then real quickly for the capacity, this May 4th, the week right now, the US domestic seats are down 71% compared to the first week of the year. It's important to note the airlines don't generally cancel. They don't pull their data out of OAG until the last minute. So this number actually could look a little worse. And this same week for Delta's international operations, you could see that they're down like 93% compared to last year. These two maps really speak volumes. And as Captain DePete mentioned with the payroll support program, I mean, I think everybody was able to breathe a sigh of relief when this was finally signed. It does give the airlines a chance to stop and regroup and to figure out how we're going to deal with the unprecedented fall in travelers. The airline portion of the payroll support program is $25 billion. Cargo, I believe, was another $4 billion of the $2.2 trillion package. I think the biggest surprise may have come from the fact that this portion was not going to be all grants. basically the loan portion, they turned it into a loan. 30% of the funds over 100 million will now be a loan. The good part is that this is to take care of payroll and employment guarantees, no involuntary furloughs or pay and benefit reductions through September 30th. So it does give the carriers, I believe, a chance, everybody, a chance to catch our breath and to think longer term. There is, as part of the CARES Act, there's another $25 billion in loans. That's a loan program, and the airlines have access to that as well. So Wall Street, some of the expectations that we're hearing, U.S. passenger revenues for 2020 will be down over 50% compared to 2019. U.S. airlines will lose $38 billion this year, and hopefully rebound to a minimal profit next year. Well, hopefully rebound to a big profit, but they're forecasting a minimal profit next year. I guess I have to say we don't know yet what these numbers are going to entail. The cargo industry update, if we have a little bit of a happy note here, the cargo kilometers flown by freighters is actually up. You know, they're the blue bars here from March of 2020 versus March of 2019. The belly hold, the cargo ton miles that are usually flown in the passenger bellies is about 50% though. And as you can see, that's down. And how we're going to make up that capacity, we're not going to be able to. I mean, there's not enough freighters to basically take care of all that. So the question is, I mean, how long will it take for the volumes to recover this time? After post 9/11, it took about 2 years for the cargo volumes to increase and or to get back to level. And after the global financial crisis, it took about 10 years. Coming into 2020, we did have a slight decrease coming into 2020 due to the US and China trade issues that were going on. And so we had that really not helping us. The one good note though, or another good note with the cargo is the cargo airlines are benefiting from this. For March, overall US dollar revenues have been up like 80% March over March. So the cost of freight is good. I mean, at least it's bringing in money. What does the future look like? This is where everybody needs to pause and just catch their breath. It changes every day. I mean, even just this afternoon, I was receiving numerous slides to add to here because the data is changing. But domestic market behavior is a critical indicator as the post-pandemic recovery is expected to be led by the domestic travel. And I believe the leisure travel, then followed by corporate. And then hopefully once the international governments ease their border restrictions, hopefully that'll return. Early indications show that passengers though are cautious. I mean, I think we were optimistic with China. You know, once the infection rates were falling to a very low level, we thought that, you know, they would increase, and it appears that they're plateauing it at about 40% of pre-COVID levels for their number of domestic flights. Australia, there's really still not a sign of recovery, even though they, as of the other day, have been down to very low levels of infection. So this slide right here is very busy. It's the goal is to give you an idea of what Wall Street is saying on the passenger airline industry, and basically I believe we're in for the long haul. It goes anywhere from 2 years to three to 5 years for a recovery to get back on really sound footing. It's going to take a while, but like Dr. Higgins said five or 6 weeks ago, I mean, we lead a recession and we lag a recovery. So timing is everything, and we'll just have to, you know, make the most of it and get through it. The hardest part about this is that it is so different from any other downturn. I mean, this is unprecedented, and it's the social distancing measures that and restrictions that, of course, they were for the good of the country. I mean, to help curb the spread of the virus, but they are taking their toll on loss of income, business earnings, jobs. So the prospects and the path of recovery for the second half of this year, it's going to depend on that. I mean, everything we probably could figure out ourselves. I mean, when and at what pace will the lockdown measures ease? When will households feel confident enough to engage in discretionary spending? To what extent fiscal monetary policy measures will keep businesses afloat? I mean, all of these factors are so difficult to gauge, basically. So, I mean, to try to get an economic forecast is extremely difficult. I think the main thing, the only thing that we know is with certainty is the fact that nobody really knows right now. Like I mentioned before, our charts change like daily. I mean, every day. So what economic and financial analysis looks at. So it's definitely a challenge, but as Captain DePete said, you know, we will get through it. We'll get through it together. As I tell my two college students that are upstairs right now, you know, you have to stay focused, stay positive, and control what you can. I mean, we have to just take care of what we can take care of, and don't lose our passion, that's for sure. And that's not only for them, that's for us as adults. So anyways, questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions. If you want to type them into the Q&A section at the bottom of the presentation, I'll be happy to help you find some answers. And with that, I believe Mike Hamilton was going to take over. Thank you.
Amy, you need to stop sharing there.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for having me on again, which was under better circumstances, and we were in person there in Grand Forks. I'm Mike Hamilton. I'm currently an instructor for United Airlines on the 777. I'm also a longtime ALPA volunteer. I serve for United Airlines on the Executive Council for ALPA National as an Executive Vice President. And I also work for the United MEC as their Executive Administrator. A little bit about my background. I received a bachelor's in aeronautics at Parks College, graduated in '93. After graduation, I instructed at Parks until I was hired at Air Midwest in 1995, flying Beech 1900s for the US Air Family. And in 1997, I was hired at United, and that's where I've been since. Flown the 727, 2 seats, not 3. Missed my opportunity to fly captain because I just didn't bid it. Flew the 777, 57, 67, 37. And a lot of those classes weren't by choice, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit about now. I'm sure you've heard on every commercial and probably from a lot of people that we're in uncharted territory here. And what we're seeing today is unlike anything we've seen in the industry previously, which leads to the biggest question for most pilots is what does that mean for employment and staffing? There's really no playbook for this, but it may be informative to look at the past. And the biggest challenge that pilots have faced previously was what is commonly referred to as the lost decade. So as Amy just talked about, I'm going to focus on what happened between 2000 and 2015. As you can see, we talked about there was a recession in 2001 that kind of turned the 9/11 attacks, and then the impact that had on the industry, and then again the subprime meltdown 2007 recession. So that lost decade kind of patterns that roller coaster from 2000 to 2010. You know, the first economic dip that was kind of pre-led by the dot-com crash, the effects of that were being felt actually leading into the summer of 2000. And then the 9/11 terror attacks of 2001 and economic downturn after that impacted the industry even harder than it hit the general economy. The economy did rebound, but unfortunately the damage that was done to the industry didn't allow the airlines to fully take advantage of the economic recovery that you saw after that. The industry So a number of airlines were forced into bankruptcy during that period. And then as the industry began to emerge from the bankruptcy era, then the subprime meltdown kind of hit us in the 2007, 2008 recession, actually prevented a lot of airlines from being able to take full advantage of the bankruptcy exit. And for the airlines that hadn't gone into bankruptcy, that actually drove a number of airlines into bankruptcy at that point because they're already weak and going in. To add insult to injury during that period, the recession also saw oil prices run up to over $100 a barrel in 2008. And for a industry that's so dependent and impacted by oil prices, that kind of exacerbated the problem at the time. For pilots, what further impacted their ability to move on to larger airlines, get jobs at the majors, was the change in age from retirement age from 60 to 65. So slide 3 here, you can see, what you can see here is the impact on the industry during that period. And what you can see is, I actually pulled out some of the smaller airlines and a number of international airlines, but this is a pretty good illustration of the two waves that you saw in that decade, the post 9/11 wave of bankruptcy, and then the post 2007 recession waves of bankruptcy. And the employees are the ones that kind of felt the bulk of the effect of those bankruptcies. And for pilots, it's most impactful to see how that impacted hiring and furloughs. Just to reinforce, it wasn't just the recession. So the recessions that we saw were kind of, it was double whammies through the whole thing. We had dot-com bubble, 9/11, the Iraq War. We had a little SARS outbreak, which kind of sounds a little bit like COVID, only it wasn't nearly as impactful. Another recession, 65, and the oil prices I mentioned. So the majors, as you can see, leading into 2000 were actually hiring. Nearly every major airline was hiring at historic levels. When the music stopped in 2001, there was an exceptional reversal in manpower after 9/11. And it continued as the airlines tried to stay out of, and eventually entered bankruptcy. The furloughs that you see unraveled most of the hiring that occurred from 1997 through 2001. And the restart of hiring didn't really occur until 2004 when we saw that modest recovery in the economy. But you can see that doesn't track exactly as the same as the recovery that the general population saw. The loosening of scope rules, so we'll see this in the next slide. You can see that the hiring didn't really rebound at the majors, but there was an awful lot of hiring being done at the regionals. And then just as hiring started to ramp up in 2007, 2008, we went right back into a recession. The airlines were already a little weakened state going into that. And you can see that 2007 pretty much erased all of the growth that had occurred previous to that. If you look, you can see that the recovery really wasn't seen in the major pilot ranks until well after 2010. Two sides to every coin, right? So this is regionals versus regional hiring versus furloughs. And what you can see here is the effects of the relaxation of scope restrictions that occurred during the bankruptcies. And then kind of a philosophy of business practice for the majors to start spreading their regional flying to more airlines. So prior to that, a number of airlines employed 1 or 2 regionals to cover their feed. That expanded after bankruptcy. And United, going into 2020, we had, I think, 7 airlines doing our feed, which was, 20 years ago, not the norm. So the mid-size airlines, so these are the LCCs. What you can see here is that the low-cost carriers, actually we had new carriers enter the market. There was that impact immediately after 2011 or 2001, but as more and more regionals or mid-size and LCCs entered the marketplace, they kind of filled in to where a number of the majors had kind of retreated. Their lower cost allowed them to operate in the markets that were not supported by the higher cost of the airlines. And a number of the major airlines shrank during the bankruptcy era, lost, parked entire fleets. Like at United, for instance, we parked a 737-200 fleets, DC-10, the old school 747s, and as well as the 27s. So with the smaller airline sizes, a more strict focus on yield, they pulled out of a lot of markets that didn't really support or create higher yields, and the low-cost carriers filled those gaps. And here's cargo. So you can see the cargo numbers kind of parallel exactly what Amy showed you on the slides. Cargo seems to be a safer harbor than other places during recessions, but they aren't recession-proof either. So COVID in the industry, and this is pretty much a rehash of what you've heard, and you'll hear the same things over and over again. What we're hoping, though, is that this is a shorter crisis than what we saw in the 2000 through 2010 era. The 2010 era, it seemed like we just couldn't we were just spinning in the mud. It was every time it looked like things were getting better, we got hit by something else. So we're hopeful that the airlines are doing their best to manage their cash burn. That's cash is king right now. And you're going to see airlines take different approaches on that, from parking of fleets, which you've already seen at American and Delta, to short and long-term storage. That's what United is doing. And Southwest is kind of powering on, so they're hoping to maintain their market share. We're not quite sure which one of those philosophies is going to work. We'll let you know in about 6 to 12 months. But we'll see that, I think what you're going to see is that every corner of the industry, unlike previously, is going to be impacted by this. So I don't think that you'll see such a disparity when we look at hiring and furloughs between the different sections of the airline industry like you did during the decade previous. I'm not going to, this is kind of pretty redundant. What we're really hoping for is an 18 to 24 month recovery. But everyone needs to be mentally prepared for that 36 or longer. But here's your silver lining for those of you who are just entering the industry. This hasn't changed. 65 is still 65. Pilots are still retiring. So regardless of how long it takes for that recovery to come, this is on the horizon. So as far as timing goes, it's a lot better than when I slipped out of college in '93, when Eastern and Pan Am had just hired or gone out of business and furloughed everybody. This is with no real change or bubble like this in sight. So this is your good news. This is what you need to keep focused on. Thank you guys for watching tonight, and just don't forget your goal. You're in this. You chose this industry for a reason, because it's fantastic. Like Joe, I wouldn't change anything, even though it's been quite a roller coaster for the last 20 years. But you need to prepare yourself to be in a position to take care of the recovery when it comes. The harder you work, the luckier you get. So keep it up, don't give up. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to First Officer Paul Ryder, who's going to talk to you about the industry outlook and the pilot ecosystem going forward.
Great, thanks, Mike.
All yours.
All right, hopefully you can see the screen there. Is it on the full presenter screen for y'all?
Yep, it's good.
All right. So as Mike said, my name is Paul Ryder. I'm the National Resource Coordinator for the Airline Pilots Association. I work in Captain Pete's office and am tasked with special projects, as well as working with our staff and committees to ensure that we're accomplishing the goals of our association for the pilots. One of the things that has been sort of in my purview has been working on pilot supply and the pilot ecosystem. And so that's what I'm going to try to focus on here today for you. So hopefully you'll take the information you've heard from Amy and from Mike and be able to digest that with a little bit of an outlook as I turn this more pilot focused to your careers. So this first slide really just outlines where you are in the overall ecosystem. You're in the training and education segment of your career. Whether you're a freshman or a senior getting ready to graduate, you're in actually a great spot right now, because to some degree you're insulated from a lot of the harm that is going to be happening to the industry, and in a position to mitigate that. And I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But as you can see, the path from starting your career to your retirement is along the same line and trajectory as everyone else. it's where you enter and how you progress that brings in the variability. And so let's talk a little bit about supply of pilots. And this slide's going to illustrate the data we get from the FAA, but it probably doesn't speak to you. And so when you look at spreadsheets and you turn them into a graph from the FAA Airman Certification Branch, you're going to see something like this. And you have to begin to interpolate, why do we have the swings that we do? Some of it is because of the way that they're collecting the data and processing the new certificate action. Part of it is because of a shutdown in January where you see that last dip of the FAA from last year. And that doesn't do us a whole lot of good in terms of looking at the ecosystem from a global perspective. So what we do here is we've taken that average out and just made it an easy linear graph for you to be able to see that last year we had year to date about 500 new ATPs being produced each month. And that's a great number. This last 12 months, year to date, we've had just shy of 600. And what that does is it gives us a baseline understanding of what our ecosystem can produce and what impacts that production rate as well as hiring. So this next slide talks about how the industry responds, particularly the training industry and flight students respond to downturns in the economy, particularly downturns or furloughs at the mainline carriers. And you can see that as the blue background is essentially a culmination, it's the sum of all hiring at major carriers. And what you see with the orange line is the new commercial certificates issued. And as the industry responds, there's a little bit of a lag with response to flight school interest in starting new students, in students beginning their training, and ultimately getting, in this case, a commercial certificate. When we talk about hiring, there's also a lag. The hiring lag is, you can see here, when the blue line starts to grow, we're seeing a slightly delayed response from the new commercial certificates. And so what that tells us is that the market is watching what happens within industry, particularly the flight training market, and it responds, but it has to respond with confidence. So how does that impact you in terms of making your career decisions, and what's the play that you can expect to see here? Well, on average, it takes about 6 months or so for the flight training market to start to go on a downward trajectory as a result of a collapse or a significant decline in hiring, and certainly with furloughs. What we've also seen is it's anywhere from 2 to 4 years for the market to respond positively to an increase in hiring and opportunity at the mainline carriers. So what these horizontal arrows depict is a point in time that correlates to hiring and certificate production from the new students. How does that factor in with what we're seeing right now? Here you can see that the unemployment claims that have been coming in are rather staggering. Previously, records were about 400,000+ applications in a day. We're at over 26.5 million unemployment claims at this point. And this really tees up this next slide. The coronavirus created an issue for the airlines, but as the working towards a remedy to coronavirus has procrastinated, or not procrastinated, but prolonged, it creates secondary and tertiary effects. And so that impact on the airline industry isn't just the diminishing interest in travel because of a concern about coronavirus. What we're really seeing is a diminish in travel because of people's access and ability to do travel, purchase tickets, both from a business standpoint and a leisure standpoint. And so when you have that many unemployment numbers and folks in a dire financial situation, it creates a rather lengthy process for the airlines to get back to an economic footprint that allows them to be successful. So here on this slide, what I want to show you is that this isn't our first rodeo as an industry. This isn't the first time we've seen a prolonged event that has created an economic hardship for the industry as a whole. Going back to the early 2000s. We start off with September 11th and the terrorist attacks. We had a SARS outbreak. We had a war, avian flu. And you can see that as we go along, we find our first period of profitability. And that's where we didn't have any major issues, crises, and that allowed the airlines to recover. And if you go back and you look at the slides that I was showing you, you can see that the response from the industry was, when there's an opportunity for profitability, the hiring increases, the fleets start to grow, and the industry becomes healthy again. Then we started to have another challenge with swine flu, the tsunami, the West African Ebola. We had a recession and global financial crisis. And then all of a sudden we had some opportunities for sustained profitability. And during that sustained profitability, because we didn't have any long, prolonged issues, we were able to structure the airlines in a way that made them resilient to small challenges, small health issues, geopolitical issues, and conflicts in the area, or local domestic challenges. And during that period of time, in the last several years, we've seen airlines build a strong financial footing, a market that has allowed them to grow their fleets, has allowed pilot staffing numbers to increase, and of course, a great time to be an airline pilot. So what we see now is a challenging picture yet again in front of us. But what you need to know, and this reinforces what Mike was saying about retirements, is that we're going to consistently see, and this is a chart of all of the major carriers that are in the United States, and we're going to start to see consistent for retirements over the next several years. And we should see about an average of between 25 and 3,200 pilots retiring each year for the foreseeable future. That is unlike what happened after 9/11. It's unlike what happened after 2008, because during that time, not only was the industry furloughing and we were seeing back-to-back challenges, but we also saw a change in the retirement age. Right now, the retirement age is at 65. It seems to be holding at 65. There's no interest in moving that. And that allows us to forecast that we're going to have projected movement off the top of the list at all of the mainline carriers at a pretty good rate. So how does the projected retirement factor into the health of the industry right before this pandemic? Well, what you can see here is that large jet hiring was hovering anywhere from about 3,500 to about 5,000 pilots a year. And our new ATP issuances were at about, this past rolling 12 months was just shy of 7,000. So we had a really robust pipeline of flight training that was in part military, in part civilian flight school, part civilian university. And together they were producing a great candidate, a robust supply that was resilient to the small fluctuations that we saw up and down. But as we move into the next era, what we need to know is that those numbers are going to diminish. The chart about 3 charts back showed that as the industry starts to take a decline, we're going to start seeing the industry respond in about 6 months with diminished enrollment numbers. We're going to probably anticipate that those enrollment numbers will remain diminished for some period of time until the airlines can start to build confidence in the flight training institutions and those pursuing flight training that it may be a good time to start getting back into it. The good news is we have the system in place to train the pilots that are necessary. The challenge is that the music's going to stop for a little while. Here we've got just overall production year over year, right through year to date 2020. And since we started really tracking this after the FOQ, which was sort of a reset on how we were keeping track of numbers, we've produced a very strong number of new ATPs in the system. And while it well outpaced the retirements, and you might wonder why, it's because the airlines were having growth. So the difference between retirements and the number of pilots hired was the growth of the airlines. And that's really important because as the airlines begin to shrink or cut capacity, even though we're going to have a continuation of retirements, you're going to see potentially furloughs at a variety of different airlines. And you might wonder why. Well, we're still seeing retirements, but the number of retirements don't outpace the cut in capacity and the number of retirements don't outpace the production of pilots that we've had over the last several years. And that leads to this slide. And what's important to look here is not exactly what the dates are below it, but really is to see what the potential outcomes are from a pilot career standpoint. So there's talk of a V recovery, a U recovery, an L recovery. What you need to know is that right now, there's no accurate model to predict exactly when we're going to see a recovery and whether or not it's going to be rapid or it's going to be slow. Now is the time to focus on what you have ahead of you and know that not only the Airline Pilots Association is advocating to make sure that pilot careers remain intact and still a desirable type of profession for you to continue in, but there's a lot of other folks working together to get the economy started just as quickly and safely as we can. So going back to this slide, you're at the beginning of a great career. And this is not a setback, but it's a challenge that you're going to experience now that has been seen before and will be seen again in your career. It's a great opportunity to use the advantages of where you are in a training environment where you're somewhat insulated to prepare yourself for graduation. And those of you that have recently graduated and have the opportunity to instruct or find any sort of, I would suggest doing that. But in terms of how you want to process this, there's a couple things that I think are really important. First, stay focused. Your distractions and detractors are going to impact your resolve and your success. The market will downturn. The production of pilots will decrease. Airlines will likely furlough. And that's been done before. What we have that's unlike any situation like this in the past is that we have time to plan. We have time to adjust prior to the full impact. And that's really a result of the CARES Act. And so that made a huge impact on not only pilots' ability to see a challenge coming up ahead from an airline pilot perspective, but it allowed our employers, our airlines, to be better prepared for when the funding of the CARES Act dries up and for when the economy starts to turn around and to what level. The next thing is stay informed. Use this time to learn more about the industry, how to be resilient, and realize that these types of events are part of the roller coaster ride that is being an airline pilot. Mike talked about this isn't going to be the last time you see this, and it certainly won't. We're part of an industry that is exposed to these types of risks. But the upsides are really good. And the downsides are something that we've learned to navigate successfully and with the benefit, I view, of being a member of the Airline Pilots Association. There's a huge team behind you to help you navigate that. And my friend Costas is going to talk about the type of resources and support you have through the ACE clubs and through our outreach from the Education Committee. Also, be confident. Know the pathway that you're on. Make sure that you are committed to that. Make sure that you are organized and that your focus is to be a successful pilot. When you start wavering in your commitment to that, when you start losing your confidence, it's going to make that process a lot more challenging. You want to make sure you excel in everything you do right now, because as the economy turns around, the retirements are going to occur, the hiring is going to pick back up, and you're in an excellent place as a student at the University of North Dakota, an ABI accredited school, a school with pathways to many major carriers, a known commodity of excellence in its flight training, to be one of the first people out the door in the next wave of hiring. Make sure you prepare. Don't pass up any opportunities. Be aware of employment opportunities, be aware of leadership opportunities, and make sure that you're in a position to suck up every possible advantage around you to be prepared for the next opportunity that presents itself. Learn. You're in a great academic environment. Make sure that you use every opportunity there to learn as much as you possibly can, because knowledge is power, and you'll be able to find not only great employment opportunities, but you're going to learn how to navigate challenges. You're going to learn how to use the skill set of being a good, proficient pilot in your everyday life. And then, of course, participate. Make sure that you're engaged with the ACE Club. Make sure you're engaged on campus, and make sure you're engaged in your community. Community is a huge part of aviation, and the more that you're involved in the aviation community, the better opportunity you have for networking, the better opportunity you have to be successful and to find mentors that are going to help you along your path. And lastly, make sure you're flying. Don't give up on flying. Flying hasn't given up on you. We're here to support you as the Airline Pilots Association. You're going to hear from some great folks here that have a high level of expertise in a variety of areas, and we're happy to share that with you. So in closing, our pilot ecosystem, the input side is healthy, but you can expect a downturn. It's going to be resilient as it has in the past through many downturns. And as the economy turns back around, know that the retirements happening at the mainline carriers are positioned well for you. That as the economy turns around, you're going to be on the leading edge of the next wave. And that's a great spot to be in. And with that, I'll move it over to, I think we've got Todd or...
I think Costas was next, I think.
Costas, yes, my friend Costas. Let me turn off my screen share here. All you, Costas.
All right, everybody. Good evening. How's everybody doing? This is great to be with you. I hope everybody can see the screen. I'm not sure if you see me as well. I think that depends on your settings there. But I'm Costas Civilis. I know I haven't met many of you at UND. I'm the National Education Committee Chairman for ALPA, so I have the pleasure of overseeing all of our outreach. And I just like to say it's very funny because what the Education Committee is about, which is interacting with you all, shaking hands, meeting people, going to events with mass gatherings. I think I just checked every CDC box of what we shouldn't do right now. So our volunteers are pretty down right now because we can't do anything. So we wish we could be out there, but thanks for letting me present tonight. I'm kind of going to take the information you've heard tonight and make that translatable to you. As a riddle grad myself, so I come from an aviation college background. I flew at PSA Airlines, which in the late 2010s was still a US Air Express carrier. And then in 2015, I got hired at United. And I've been there for 5 years now, just over 5 years. And we're facing, obviously, massive challenges. But as a student, what does that mean to you? And I know we've touched on it, but let's go through and kind of talk about that. I think that's important to note. So while you are building your experience, airlines are not hiring. And if you've learned anything from your mentors or through the ACE Club there at UND, seniority is everything. So now that people are not being added to seniority lists at the airlines, you're still building your experience. So like Paul alluded to, I'd argue this is actually a pretty good time to be a student or a CFI building your time because nobody's going in front of you. So that's something that's very encouraging and should motivate you to actually keep on chugging. Now's the time, that you want to get those hours, get the ratings, and get ready to be hired, because what's going to happen is as soon as this picks up, and although we don't know when that is, it will be quick when it does, and it'll spin up. You want to be ready. So that's potentially a lot less people in front of you when you get to your final destination at an airline. No matter what industry you go to, if you go to your Thanksgiving dinner table, I'm sure that everybody in your family in any field that they work has seen some sort of peak in a valley. If we think back to, they called it the dot-com bubble. The dot-com bubble, all those tech folks that were investing and working in websites and software entrepreneurship, all of that crashed for a brief moment of time after the turn of the millennium in 2000. There have been other things I can mention, but I just want you to know that our industry tends to be very public. We know that when we put on the uniform, we represent an industry and the public instills their trust in us. And likewise, when our industry has one minor mishap, if an airliner lands with a flat tire, what happens? It's on every major news network. When that happens to a car, you never hear about it. And likewise, when something happens to our industry that's massive, it's going to be talked about 24/7. So just know that you're going into a very public face industry, and that's something you'll have to push through. What's very interesting, though, is you have your CRM courses. You talk about it with your flight instructors. But right now, with everything that's going on and you're worried, we still have ALPA pilots and pilots at other airlines that are non-ALPA going to work and safely getting packages and people, the few people that are flying, from point A to point B safely. And that takes an extreme amount of mental fortitude and education and skill to be able to go to work knowing that some people have a clock on their job. We don't know when a furlough is going to happen after October 1st, if a furlough will happen. Will there be a pay cut? There's a lot of unanswered questions, and we need to show up to a cockpit and we need to check all that baggage at the door, because when we fire up those engines and you take off hundreds of thousands of pounds of metal and fuel, that's why we're a professional, and that's why we are the best at what we do, and we do it in the best way possible. So just know that although we're worried, take pride in what you're doing, because even when you fire up that engine on a Cessna, you're going to have mental stressors and dealing with those throughout your life. It could be something at home with your family. It could be at work now with the environment. Learning how to deal with that is a very valuable skill, and flying under stress is not something we should be doing. Really quick, some frequently asked questions from students that our committee gets during this time. I want to hit on some of them, so maybe you can, before it melts into mush, as we say, you can remember it. What is cash burn and what is revenue? You have all these airlines talking about, oh, we have to match cash burn to revenue. Simply put, if you have a piggy bank of $100 and it costs you, let's say, $20 a day to live, that's everything. Well, if you have $100 and you're spending $20 a day, you have about 5 days before you're going to be out of money. And now your food and your roof and everything go away. With the airlines, that's the equivalent of revenue, essentially cash and cash burn. Airlines all have some sort of savings. It usually is in the billions for major airlines. And because revenue, which is ticket sales, anything the airline is selling, is down near zero, they're relying on their piggy bank. Easy enough. Cash burn. They're burning $40, $50, $60 million a day. And just like my example to you with your piggy bank, they also have a piggy bank, and they're looking at that going, we only have so many more months left before, at the current level, before everything runs out. Obviously, the goal of the airline and the trust that the leaders of each airline are going to do the right thing is making sure they manage that risk correctly and mitigate costs where they can in order to make sure the cash burn is, the money in is not more than the money out. That would be the goal, which is why we are in such a tough place, because the disparity between those two numbers is large. What is a displacement? Many of students, if you follow any industry news, it was out since probably Saturday that United Airlines had a large displacement that was handed out. A displacement is not a furlough. Displacement, because we have a collective bargaining agreement and we are in certain fleets. I fly the 757, 767 out of Newark. The airline can't at will take me and move me and put me on another airplane just because they want to. There is a certain process they have to do that by, and it's called a displacement. We've had displacements in the past during good times. A city pair, let's say, for example, Chicago, Hong Kong was stopped. Well, I think it was about 50 pilots or so, or 70 first officers that were no longer needed in Chicago, but they could be moved elsewhere around the system. So a displacement is how an airline moves us around. Obviously, a displacement that came out included about 5,000 pilots. That's a lot of pilots that need to be moved elsewhere. And as Paul and the others have mentioned, there's a lot of unanswered questions about when demand comes back. So although we're all moving to different airplanes. A lot of us are going back to a narrow body domestic fleet. That doesn't necessarily mean a furlough is happening. At the same time, as human beings, we just need to be prepared. So one thing that you can learn as a student now is look at what's going on. And when you get into this industry and times are equivocally going to be good at some point again, use the good times to prepare for the bad times. So that way you can weather this out, whether that be financially, mentally, and so forth. How does furlough impact hiring? Well, obviously, if an airline lays off, they won't be hiring. But I've also heard some students say, does that mean they will furlough or they will start hiring? And can I get hired while they're furloughs? The way that works is the airline would offer recall to everybody that's been laid off. So let's say they lay off 1,000 pilots. All those 1,000 pilots would have to be asked to come back before the airline hires a pilot who's not yet a part of the seniority list. That said, it is easier for an airline to bring back someone who's furloughed than it is to hire someone brand new off the street. There's a lot of different circumstances. But the point is, an airline might be able to bounce back and recall all their furloughs in a rather quick fashion should the industry bounce back. So don't think that furloughs necessarily means a decade of not hiring. That is not the case, hopefully. Will the pathway program stop? In the last 2 or 3 years, we've had amazing pathways come to be, defined pathways including Delta Propel, United Aviate, FedEx Purple Runway, the JetBlue Gateway programs. I can speak to Propel and Aviate that right now in the AA Cadet Academy, right now all 3 are still active programs because the airlines know that long-term we want to mentor our students and see them through their training, see them through their experience building, because we want that individual to fly at United or Delta or Airline X someday. And as of now, that has not stopped. Obviously, the airline can always push a button and stop it. But the point of those programs are not an immediate fix. Those are a long-term strategy, which as you saw the numbers from Paul, and you'll see another chart here in a minute, there is going to be a need for airline pilots down the road. And although right now it's drastic, we do hope to see a swing. Last frequently asked question we get, should I take an airline job right now? I'm a CFI. Or what if I take a job and I get furloughed, but I have security right now? And although no one can advise you what to do in your personal life, you have all the control to do that. We, at the education committee, we've always advocated if there's a potential to become a part of an airline seniority list, you never want to turn that down based on a what if. In an extreme environment, you might get hired and then furloughed, but you're on that list, which obviously everybody has a different situation. But when you get recalled back and you're now already at an airline, you're ahead of folks that are still trying to get hired. So depending on what your goal is, it might be something to think about. What can you do as a student now? Join your ACE club. For those of you at UND, you have an ALPA ACE club there if you didn't know. You have some folks on this call as well. Their sons are some of your ACE club leaders there. And it's a fantastic club. The ACE clubs exist at other colleges as well. So thanks for joining us. If you got the last minute memo from other ACE clubs there to listen in. We do have a scholarship, and that's something that we are delaying due to COVID. So we've kept the application window open. We have $10,000 that we give out to ALPA ACE Club students. alpa.org/scholarship. Go there. The application's still open. And that would be a great thing for you to do. The ACE Club is somewhere you can interact with mentors and really build yourself. But don't forget that on the back side of this, there will be quite a few pilots looking to get hired. So how do you stand out? I won't read every single line. Maybe you can take a snapshot if you really like something that you see. But remember, when people ask me, how do I, stand out to be a pilot at United, I like to tell them, well, right now, United still has about 7,000 pilot applications on file. What do they all have in common? Someone on the call might know, because I say this a lot at ACE Club meetings. They're all pilots. So you need to work on things that make you something else other than just a pilot, because that's who the airline's interested in hiring. What a better time to do that than right now when nobody's hiring. You can differentiate things. So do your homework on things, maybe gain some leadership positions. Try to communicate those experiences effectively on your resume. There's a lot of volunteer opportunities out there. And as you're going through life, remember some of these stories for interviews. Airlines like that. Maybe something happened to you in a Cessna. That's a great opportunity to use that in an interview someday. So maybe make a little note of it. Tell me about a time question that you may be asked and some of your experiences. No matter where you are, check rides matter. So be sure that you can study through this stress going on right now and complete your rating successfully. But the biggest thing is make good decisions. Everybody. My gosh, DUIs, license suspensions, misdemeanors. These are things that will hamper. And when we're in a time at the back end of this pandemic, when we're going to start hiring, yes, there's going to be a buildup of applicants. The airlines can be more choosy. So any blip on your record matters. So take that Uber, be responsible, and that's really where you want to focus yourselves when you're not flying. And of course, keep your logbooks updated. I can't tell you, I have talked to some pilots that are in the heart-wrenching spot right now where they might have to look for another job, and they haven't updated their logbook in a very long time. That makes it tough. Even though you might be a CFI right now for a little bit longer than you planned, or maybe a lot longer than you planned, because a little and a lot, everybody's got a different definition. So keep your flights logged, keep it accurate. Don't fall behind on it and keep yourself motivated. That's a huge, huge part of it. So that way, when it picks up, if you remember that the hiring furlough graph, airlines hire until they furlough, but guess what they also do? They furlough until they hire. So when they start hiring, it's going to turn around quite quickly. Obviously, keep yourself clean on social media. That goes without saying these days. I think we know, one little thing that's videoed on TikTok or Snapchat, saved, and now, it can be used. So try to just keep yourself clean. And of course, your work ethic. Keep it big. Global pilot demand. This was a Boeing study that was done. And the bottom line is between retirements here in the US and overseas, there will be a large projection of pilots. So please keep that in mind. Through the next 20 years, there's going to be a need. And I'll try to finish up. I had a few slides in here detailing pathways. I'll try to pass my contact info out at the end if anybody needs it. I won't go through this indefinitely, but it's just the process of becoming a pilot, the career progression that you're all familiar with. Get by an airline now at UND, you'd be paired with a mentor depending on that pathway. You'd build experience, and when the airline hires again, you'd eventually make it through their system. But the key takeaways, please be positive. Everybody on this audience today, we're here because we love it. And it doesn't come with its hard times, but we need to work through that. And we have a resource for you. ALPA is a resource for you, cleartodream.org. If you ever need to get in touch with any of us or learn more about the career or certain pathways or even day in the life stories, those are all at cleartodream.org, as well as making sure you get that scholarship I mentioned earlier. And with that, education@alpa.org, that's the easiest email I can give you to reach us. And I'm going to come off screen share. I didn't want to take too long in the presentation, so I will turn it back over to the moderator. But thank you all for letting us present.
Thanks, Costas. I think Jim is our last speaker, and then we'll open it up to some questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My name is James Belton. I'm a 767 captain for United Airlines. I've been with United just under 24 years, and I've flown everything from a 727, 757, 767, 777, and a couple other airliners at another carrier. I'm here to talk about why ALPA. And one of the neat things about these Zoom meetings is you get to listen to a whole bunch of people talk. And I looked up at the questions, and one of the first questions, I think it might be the first question, is why would I take a job with a carrier that was represented by a union as opposed to not? Well, I'm here to talk about that. I don't have fancy slides, but I think I have a pretty fancy story going forward. Since the day I was born, the Airline Pilots Association has played a vital role in my life. And you might ask, how did ALPA affect me as a small child? Well, my father was a pilot for Mohawk Airlines, and he was represented by the Airline Pilots Association, and he had a tremendously successful career. and he retired from US Airways as a 767 captain. I remember when he walked the picket line during the strike in 1971. I recall him lamenting a furlough. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but now I do. Painfully, I do. But I remember not wanting for anything as a young child and all the way through my life, because my father enjoyed a contract negotiated for him by the Airline Pilots Association. And my dad wore a battle star on top of his ALPA wings for most of his career. That meant that he went on strike for ALPA. My dad sent me through flight school at the Florida Institute of Technology, where I had one class in labor and unions. And I remember how organized labor back then was somewhat vilified. This was right after the air traffic controllers were fired throughout the nation for their union activity. After college, I found myself at a regional airline, and I was lucky. I worked for American Eagle, and I got hired in '89, so I've been an airline pilot for almost 31 years. At 23 years old, I checked out as a captain. It was 1991, and the Gulf War just kicked off, and oil was at a premium. Pan Am, Eastern had gone out of business. The world was in conflict, and I felt my job at a major carrier slipping away. So I made a decision. As long as I was going to be staying at that regional airline, I thought I better do what I can to make it worthwhile. And I ran for an elected position in our union, and I got the position. I started my second career as a union volunteer, and what a reward. During the 2 years I represented the pilots at American Eagle based out of JFK, I received the education of a lifetime. I worked on a seniority list integration, which may never happen to you, but it was tremendously interesting. And I was involved in a contract negotiation that ended in the 11th hour after a 30-day cooling off period, which also hasn't happened in a long time, but it happened when I was there. All that happened before my 24th birthday, and I had pilots twice my age at the airline that would come up to me and they'd say, "What is the union doing for me today?" And my response usually was, "You're the union. What have you done today?" I was not old enough back then to rent a car, but I could captain an airliner and represent pilots against a powerful management team from the biggest airline in the world. At that time, we were owned by American Airlines. Recall that I only had one class in my bachelor's course in college that even touched on labor and unions. It was all a mystery to me, and I was educated by the union that I was in at the time. I took a leave of absence from Eagle in the mid-90s, and no one was hiring, and I was commissioned in the Air National Guard, and I flew F-16s. I flew in combat in Iraq at age 29 and 5 times after that, and that was an education in itself. I'm still serving in the Guard, and I fly a drone. The fine ALPA volunteers that you see today have told you about the ups and downs of a career, and that's going to happen. But any career that has it down will come back. What I would like to convey to you is the fact that your education and your training to be an airline pilot is only partially complete if you get your degree and your commercial license. You need to learn how the career you're about to enter was formed and how you will enjoy the benefits of that career and how you need to learn how to defend it. In no other profession does an employer enjoy the attributes of those possessed by an airline pilot. 99% of us are pilots of highly educated background. Many earned advanced degrees in schools like Annapolis and Purdue, and even here at UND. We're trained beyond our degrees in the disciplines of flight and regularly checked by the FAA. We maintain our health and are physically checked twice a year. We show up on time for work in a crisp, sharp uniform, and we don't and can't leave work early. And we do our jobs right every time, or we pay dearly. We may pay with our lives if we don't do our jobs right. Managements around the world in non-aviation businesses would love to have airline pilots working for them. More importantly, we give our employers so much more than just our flying skills. ALPA at United Airlines has 28 committees. Pilots serve to solve problems concerning safety, scheduling, negotiating jump seat, past travel, medical, military affairs, hotels, retirement, compensation, communications, and many more. If you need legal advice, if you need medical advice, you don't go to a doctor or a lawyer, you go to your ALPA rep. And then he brings you to a doctor or a lawyer who works for ALPA. And this is what your dues dollars pay for. We do this mostly as volunteers, and we do this on behalf of our companies, primarily because our companies won't. The safety advances that have brought our industry to the outstanding state that it enjoys today are primarily and directly a result of the Airline Pilots Association. Like Captain DePete said earlier, we are the largest non-governmental safety organization in the world. ALPA is the one who keeps you safe when you fly. On campus right now at UND, ALPA has an ACE club. You can engage in many extracurricular activities on campus, from sports and fraternities to various clubs, and they're all great and probably a lot of fun. But ask yourself, how many will help you in your career? How many will help you become a 777 captain? How many will begin to show that there is more to being an airline pilot than just flying? ALPA ACE will show you how to do that, and it'll help you shepherd your career. The importance of mentorship can't be emphasized enough. Now is that time to get involved and stay informed in your career. Not every major airline has ALPA, but they all have a union. They all are engaged in the collective bargaining process, and they all need and require strong and intelligent professionals like the ones that you've heard tonight. They need to be able to handle not just the flying, but everything else we experience and enjoy about our careers. The ALPA ACE Club at UND is getting back on its feet, and from a time of depressed membership, and I think they got a good core group of people. I happen to know the president. He just happens to be my son, and he's going to be a third generation of ALPA volunteer, and I'm very proud of that. I think that they can build upon this endeavor that they've started on and help you with your career. And what you'll get out of the ALPA ACE clubs is you'll get gentlemen like Costas Civilis, and he's going to come in and he's going to help you with your career. The days of getting your 1,000th hour and stepping into a regional jet are on hold for now. And the future is uncertain, but there is no future that is certain. And that's why you need to prepare. You used to educate yourself when it comes to unionism by yourself. Now we have ALPA ACE clubs, and we have an ALPA education committee that's going to help you there. ALPA exists today to serve our members, present and future, because of people like Joe DePete, Amy, Paul, Mike, Costas, and many, many more ALPA representatives, and the 61,000 plus ALPA members that are out there. It will remain strong because of students at UND that learn about unionism and work on your behalf. In the not too distant future, these pilots will do that. I've encouraged my own son, and I have a second son showing up at UND in the fall. And I think that this is a tremendous opportunity right now for students to learn about unionism and understand that it is the second career that you have. You're not just an airline pilot. You're a mentor. You're a professional. You're a communicator, and then that's what I've been doing for most of my career, and it is certainly rewarding. When I got a call from Joe DePete a few years ago, and he asked me to work on the air safety organization, is one of the most proudest times I've ever had in my career. I'm a drone pilot in the Air Force, and I didn't think that would be worth anything in the airline world. And he said, "Hey, we need somebody with drone experience to work at the ASO," and I took that. Thanks for listening today. I'm around for questions, and I'm always available. Like Costas said, I'll give out my contact information for mentoring. My advice to you is stay healthy, stay informed, fly safe, and stay at it. You're going to be airline pilots one day. I look at all the folks that I went to school with, and my best friend in the world and roommate in college is my master chairman at ALPA, and that's really special. So thank you very much.
Captain Belton, thank you. I'm ready to go back and join the union again. That was really, really well said, and really well said for all of our. Also, Captain Belton, really good to see you. I'm a former Eagle guy as well, MEC chair there after Gavin McKenzie. Yeah.
Wow.
Sorry to drop names in front of everyone, but yeah, absolutely well said. And we've got some questions here. I just want to add one quick thing to what Captain Belton said. and I just have to do this factually. It's just who I am. But the statement was made on one of those questions about non-union carriers being paid more. I just got to tell you, as someone that teaches a class here at UND on this, that's not factually correct. So if you want to take a look at like the Endeavor contracts, the Air Wisconsin contracts, some really good contracts out there. Just wanted to make sure we got that through. First question is for Captain DePete, and I'm going to read it out here, Captain DePete. Hello, Captain DePete. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. The FAA was going to hold an open forum today concerning the coronavirus response. However, it was canceled at the last minute. Do you think the FAA is doing everything it can to ensure the airlines are following proper safety precautions to protect the crew and passengers against coronavirus?
Yeah, I think Riley was paying attention today out there to notice that. I was quite shocked at that as well. It might have had something to do with the press releases in the last several days leading up to that event. I think that the FAA took a position, recommending the CDC guidance and some of the challenges. They tried to come forward and say, well, look, we're gonna work with the carriers, and they've been compliant and trying to up their standards and everything. And yet we released some information that showed that in fact not much had really truly changed. And the only change that we did see was because of our outspokenness about it and bringing it to light. So yeah, I think the FAA is probably regrouping a bit and deciding how they want to go. There's a tremendous amount of pressure that's being put on them now from Congress as well. I want to say that doesn't happen by mistake. That happens because of the effort that ALPA has put out. We're not passive observers in our career, right? We're not just along for the ride here. Just like pilots, we are in command. We're in command of our profession. So do I think that the FAA is doing everything that it can? No, absolutely not. In fact, by doing, not doing all you can do is not a benign act. You're, in fact, putting people in additional risk by not doing what you can do, right? I mean, you're putting people in additional preventable risk, which to me is unconscionable. And that's the role of the union, right? Is to make sure we keep them honest and keep calling it out. And, safety being our primary focus, we'll continue to do that. And it wouldn't be the first time that ALPA bent reality to its will. So we will do that. We've got a lot of strong voices. And you just heard from, it is such a privilege for me to hear all those speakers that you just heard. And I was about as motivated as you were in hearing each one of them, because it's all true. It really is true. You're not just an airline pilot when you're part of ALPA. You're part of ALPA forever.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Mr. Moderator. Mr.
Yes.
Moderator, I have one question, and it's for Paul, because I think this is an important question, and it pertains to some of the other questions that came in regarding, could the COVID-19 crisis actually help in hiring and everything? And Paul, I wanted to ask you a question. Just like in the stock market, sometimes when bad news happens, there's an oversell, right? That goes on to where it really, really dips down over what would be the normal. And this becomes buying opportunities. Because of all the precautions that are being put into place right now due to the extreme situation, in other words, early outs, early retirements, all those kind of things, doesn't that factor into a pretty, when the turnaround happens, wouldn't some of those numbers be even greater perhaps in terms of the need to hire? Because, would there be even more opportunity than what we saw on your charts in terms of what we anticipated just from retirements alone?
Absolutely, Joe. So I think there's a great opportunity brewing below the surface. The pent-up demand that's going to occur while we're experiencing a downturn in terms of furloughs and stagnation, we're going to continue to see those retirements. And on top of that, there's just a natural expectation that production will probably subside a bit. And that's going to create a higher demand for pilots than we've probably experienced in the last several years. And there was already a lot of talk about a high demand for pilots. Now, while we didn't hit an acute shortage, you couple a pandemic with a significant downturn in the GDP and the economic health of the United States, and certainly this is global at this point, that's going to cause a lot of people to slow down and not pursue. That gap is going to probably be bigger than what we've seen in terms of the largest gaps in the past. that is going to create an incredible opportunity for those that are in the pipeline. And so I think it's something we have to monitor. I think it's something we have to be proactive on and engaged in. And I think it's why the work that Costas does with the Education Committee is we can't let up on the gas pedal right now. Just because we're in a downturn, we can't pretend like there won't be a high demand for pilots and for professionals moving forward. We have to be ready to take advantage of even the slightest return to normalcy and economic health. And so I think absolutely, Joe, there's a great brewing opportunity below this, but we're going to have to go through some turbulence to get there.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Well stated, and thank you for that question. So a lot of these questions are being answered through, so I'm just going to skip around a little bit. And here's a question that comes from Captain Eric. We've seen United Airlines put out a displacement bid, moving captains to first officers, and includes 4,500 displacements. Other airlines, such as Delta, will be making similar displacements. Pilots will be taking pay cuts up to around $100 an hour. These displacements are occurring prior to October 1st. How is this not in direct conflict with the primary intent of the CARES Act? Well, that's a tough question, but I don't know who wants to take that.
Any United pilots out there want to answer that question before the president does?
I
can
can talk about it if Mike doesn't want to talk about it.
I think we could probably both team on that.
Sure.
I think American just actually announced surplus today as well. It's coming. You can't park fleets and not have surpluses. I think we've approached the Treasury Department to see what their thoughts are on this. So what we're kind of trying to understand is how the CARES Act's intent and language kind of intersects with what's happening with displacements. The displacements are all contractually allowed. The union, ALPA, is making sure that the displacement process is being adhered to correctly per the contract. We're making sure that the company isn't cutting any corners when it comes to training. So they're not shortcutting or fast tracking any of the displacements or training. But as of today, none of the contracts have been abrogated. Pay rates have not been cut. So your displacement is putting you in a lower paying position. But like I said, we have reached out to Treasury to kind of, and some friends in Congress and Senate to see if that was in fact the intent of the act.
And Mike, I'd like to just add to that one thing that ALPA and other unions were very integral in getting that act passed and making sure that there was compensation protection for us. Now, I remember flying after 9/11, and the ATSB was the Airline Transportation Stabilization Board. I think that was the acronym at the time. And there was money put aside for the airlines. And I at United Airlines was displaced, and I took a couple of pay cuts. And United Airlines asked twice to that ATSB for money, and they got $0. So the big difference between then and now is that our Congress acted almost unanimously to make sure that the employees in the airline industry were going to be not necessarily made whole, but we weren't going to be out on the street and starving. And the reason why Congress was really encouraged to act was because of people in our legislative committees, people like Captain DePete out on Capitol Hill, making sure that we were taken care of, and we're going to see that.
And I'll add what was critical about the CARES Act, even, I mean, just from a 50,000 foot view, is it gave the airlines and everyone time to kind of breathe through their nose and start making rational decisions. Absent that, I mean, when you look at Delta and United have pulled down over 20% of our schedule, that has direct manpower implications. And were it not for the CARES Act, I think every airline would be making decisions based on that reality, as opposed to the reality that hopefully will come in the fall when we start seeing a recovery. One thing to keep in mind is when airlines furlough, it's an 18 to 24 month payoff. So when a pilot goes out the bottom, they have to train replacements both up and down. And for a pilot to get furloughed and then get called back within 6 months, it completely disincentivizes the company to do that furlough because it costs them more to do it than the money they save. So the CARES Act is actually helping us to have a rational sane discussion when it comes to manpower as opposed to a reactionary overstep by management.
Excellent. Another question from Lewis. Is it true the CBA ensures any furloughed pilot must be hired back before any new pilots can be hired? Yes. If so, the impact new pilots coming through the pipeline can be significant. Are there any ways to mitigate the impact for young and low-time pilots? So I'm not sure who wants to take that, maybe Paul or Costas.
Well, I know Paul will have something to say, but I think, this goes back to the question of the situation that we're in right now. I'm thinking we're seeing a major sell-off happening right now, right? Which is going to really cause a set of dynamics that we hadn't seen previously to this degree. And I do believe, just like Mike said, furloughing is not, it's not cost neutral by any means, right? There's a significant investment that the corporation has to make, and there's a payback period in there that makes it make sense. But I truly believe that we're going to see here is that, as in any furlough, you lose people in furloughs. You don't necessarily get them all back. And based on the nature of some of the packages that we've developed right now in terms of some of those early retirements, some of them are very attractive. I've seen, some of the ones at United, at JetBlue, say goodbye. Those people are 4 years out and they're probably going to leave and they're not coming back. So to me, I really think that once the turnaround happens, and I believe it's going to be vicious, there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of people that are going to want to see as much economic activity as quickly as possible. I believe there's going to be a huge hiring boom here, and you got to be ready. Now, I will say this, though, and, because I was really motivated by Jim in particular, some of the things you said really did strike to my heart, because my dad was also a union man all his life. But, it's often said that if you look, I saw a couple of pictures of airplanes, right? And I think something stirs in our soul whenever we see an airplane. If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. I think there's a lot of truth to that, particularly for pilots. This is not the kind of career you sort of, get into because you hope you're going to be all right with it and it's going to work. You are either an aviator or you are not an aviator. You could never last and make it all the way through the career, right? Or even get to the majors. You're going to know immediately if this is for you. But there's a love for it, I think, that is both tangible and intangible. And if you're like me and you looked at those pictures and you said, man, I wish I was there. I wish I was in that cockpit, or I wish I could fly that airplane, or you get the thrill of pushing up those power levers, you're a goner. You might as well just buy into it. And you need ALPA to protect your profession, and we will.
So the only thing I'll add to that, and then I'll kick it over to Costas, is that, yes, absolutely, furloughed pilots are protected, and they're the first ones back because they're employees, they're members of ALPA, they're members of that airline. They've contributed to the revenue, and they've put their heart and soul into making that airline successful, and so they get the first slot back. But I'll challenge your perspective on how you view the impact it has on a new pilot coming up, because those pilots have to go back. That furlough protection is to protect that pilot's investment in their professional airline career and in their airline. And that protection will be available to you as a low-time pilot once you're hired on by that airline. And so know that when you get an airline job and it's paying better, and in the case of our mainline carriers, it's paying significantly better than most low-time pilot opportunities, it's that income that's going to be protected. It's the return to that income, the return to that carrier that's being protected. And so you have to look at it as a long-term investment. But the best part about the furlough protection for you as a member is that you're going to go back at the rate of pay or the longevity that you were at, and in some cases continue to accrue longevity, and your pay rate will continue to increase so that when you return, you're made whole. And that varies slightly by carrier, but it is protection. Costas, what are your thoughts? Anything to add?
No, I thought both of you have answered it, and I think there's other questions, so nothing here. We can move on.
Excellent. Okay. Question for Captain DePete. Someone who is close to being at airline minimums, would it be recommended to stay as a CFI or start training with a regional airline? I would like to start training at a regional, but don't want to give up my opportunity I currently have as a CFI at UND. And I think this might have been, I think Paul might have addressed this as well, but since this is addressed to Captain DePete, we'll start there.
Okay, so if it was me, all right, and it's hard to do because this is individual in a lot of ways, and I pay very much close attention to Paul's advice. I think his advice is solid. And Paul, don't feel compelled to at least, agree with me or anything like that. But I would say that if I have the CFI box checked, right, and my goal is to further and deepen my resume, right, then obviously working for a 121 carrier at a regional airline makes you significantly more hireable, right, for the majors. And so I would be looking at that kind of a decision to make. At that point, I realized that there's no guarantees in any of this, right? And you may make the move and whatever. But if you could get on, I would get on. But Paul, what do you think? Not trying to take away the UND instructors, by the way, though.
No, I agree. I agree with you, Captain DePete.
But
so
Paul,
it's definitely a personal decision. I think a lot goes into that. Getting a seniority number at an airline is certainly beneficial as well. But Joe, I think you hit it on the head. Expanding your opportunity for your experience and demonstrating your skill sets, your proficiency, and some leadership opportunity is certainly very helpful towards that long-term goal of being an airline pilot. And if their goal is to be an airline pilot, a mainline carrier, I think that lends itself. Costas has a lot of experience with dealing with pilots that are at the collegiate level and looking to move on. I'd really love to hear what your experience has been talking to students, particularly recently, on their concerns or perspectives, because I think that's a question everybody has.
You're absolutely right, Paul. But it's actually no different than the questions we get on a daily basis, where we're working with folks that are at a crossroads. And pre-COVID, it was never this kind of a question, but it was, do I go cargo? Do I go 135? Do I go fill in the blank? And that's where we've been trying to help. But we never would tell someone exactly what to do. Like Captain DePete said, that's everybody has a personal stake in this. Maybe you can't move far from home for a certain reason. These are things you need to take into account. But assuming, let's talk about me personally, and I'm trying to go to an airline, I'm 100% going to take an airline job to get on that seniority list and be able to go back. But moreover, you could ask anybody on this panel today, if you ask them on, January 15th, if we would by April 1st have been talking about trillions of government aid because we're all going to go bust, they would have called you crazy. Likewise, I'm trying to say things change fast. So if you think you're going to be furloughed by going to an airline, you are planning too far ahead. Take the job, because you don't know what's going to happen 6 weeks from now, let alone 6 months from now. So rest assured that if you want to further your career, exactly as both the pilots before me said, take that builder and work with it.
ALPA has a lot of insight into what goes into hiring somebody, and it may be a wonderful instructor, but it's also different now to show a different skill set, flying in a 121 environment, in a crew, right, with those kinds of things. And I think that's very valuable. It reduces the risk of someone hiring you because they know that you could survive in that environment.
Excellent. Okay. Jumping around just a little bit here. Mike, prior to COVID-19, one of the major issues that ALPA was advocating for was the enforcement of scope clauses. With many airlines growing international flying through joint ventures, what impact do you think this downturn will have on joint ventures and scope issues?
Good question.
Well, good news. If you're a domestic airline and you want to do more international flying, it looks like some of the international partners won't be around when this is all done. That was something that United had pretty strong international scope language. Delta was working on theirs. I think that was one of the main focuses in their next Section 6. Some of the international partners that Delta partner with are not going to be around when the dust is settled here. And I think there'll be a lot more motivation for airlines to operate over, especially in Atlantic. Some of the low-cost carriers in Atlantic have already exited the marketplace. So I think it will add and some of the Latin American airlines are probably not going to survive this as well. So it definitely will, it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out at the other end. With fewer dance partners, it'll be interesting to see if people fight over the remaining dance partners or decide to actually do the flying themselves. So we'll see what that looks like here and hopefully near future.
Excellent. Anyone want to add anything to that? All right. Thank you for
That's
that.
perfect.
Complicated question. Yeah. Okay. A couple questions here. I think they might have already been answered, but just to make sure we're getting everything answered. When airlines start laying off employees, do you think it will be challenging for aviation students to be hired in the near future? Paul, would you like to take a stab at that?
Sure. So the reality is yes. When and if we experience a high degree of furloughs from the mainline carriers and then the regional carriers, a lot of the opportunities for pilots and early career opportunities for pilots are going to be flush with applicants. And that's going to mean that the employer has the luxury of a wide band of selection criteria, and they will historically have skewed towards a more experienced pilot. But with that said, you also realize often that a mainline pilot is going to go back to that mainline carrier, given the opportunity. And so they weigh all those things out, just like it's a personal decision for a pilot on where they want to go. The employers also look at a lot of factors. So it's not accurate to say there's not going to be jobs for low-time pilots and early career opportunities for pilots. It is probably very accurate to say that there's going to be a lot more applicants than there were about 3 weeks ago when we start moving forward. And this fall is probably going to be one of those times where you want to have your A game. You want to make sure you're properly prepared for an interview. You want to make sure you've got everything in a row. You've taken the time to be an excellent applicant and just the right person to apply.
And I'll just add to that. One of the things that kind of gave me an inside track in my career is I took advantage of the United internship, which was one of the few career path program type programs out there back in the 90s. People that go to UND or some of the other ABBY accredited universities, you've got access to all of those different career path programs. It would be in your best interest to take advantage of every opportunity you have like that, because that's going to put you on a faster track. So, it's going to be a challenging couple of years. There's no kind of two ways about that, but, this is the time to both, advance yourself professionally and personally, so that when it's time to do that interview, that you're the rock star candidate. So this is an opportunity to kind of improve that resume, improve your interview skills.
Excellent. Okay. And we've really taken a lot of your time so far. So, and I know, Mike, you mentioned that a few of you might be able to stay on and answer some questions as well, but maybe just a couple more questions, and then whoever has to leave, because I know you guys are very busy folks right now. One question I thought that was kind of interesting is this one. What can the airlines do to improve consumer confidence in flying again since COVID-19? Rapid viral testing prior to boarding, requiring masks with every flight, spacing seats out, or is it just a matter of time? And I'm not sure who wants to take that.
Ooh.
Captain DePete.
I've been talking about that 25 times in 25 interviews today in 7.5 hours. Look, all those things are good steps, right? They're all good steps. But when you're dealing with a pandemic, it makes no sense to only implement certain things and not other things, right? Because you really negate the positive things you just did, right? The virus doesn't care that you did really well in one area and poorly in another. So really what it does, it comes back to that whole question and our frustration at ALPA, is that the FAA needs to make those types of steps mandatory, right? All the CDC guidance should be mandatory if we want to get the airlines back up and running, restore consumer confidence again, passengers get back in an airplane and know that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe. Really as simple as that.
Outstanding. Okay. Maybe a final question, and then whoever's willing to stay on, it's okay. If you all have to go, that's fine too. But question is there concern for the industry? And I've heard this from some of our students, by the way, so this is a really good question. Is there concern for the industry, even when the economy rebounds, that business travelers will travel less because they've learned how to work remotely?
I'd like to go ahead and answer that. I'll go ahead. It's very interesting. My uncle is actually a account manager over at American Express. He actually oversees 3 of the biggest corporate travel accounts in the U.S. and he works a lot with United. Very interesting. And in talking with him, who's a direct source, I mean, his clients buy thousands of tickets on all of our airlines a year, and they are dying to fly again. The bottom line is, and I can say this, and I'm going to take a joking stab at Captain DePete here. I certainly hope we can still go out with our education committee budget and talk to students after this, because I'll tell you what, Zoom just doesn't cut it. That face-to-face interaction is what you need. Shaking the hands to close the deal, or in our case, going and meeting with students. This is fabulous, and I thank, obviously UND for putting this on. This is great. But when you're thinking long-term, I want to see my audience and who I'm speaking to. And I know in talking with my uncle who oversees these travel accounts, those companies are going nuts that they cannot get out there and do their business. Yeah, in the short term, this is something to bridge that gap. But long-term, and I know that United, our leadership has indicated both publicly and in our town halls, that they are still being approached for their long-term business contracts, which fill our Polaris seats that do bring a massive amount of revenue. So I don't think that's a solution long-term. Hey, maybe it hurts the employees a little bit if now they're sick from home and they can still be at work, but not from a long-term travel stance.
Okay. Yeah, I've learned new terms myself. Zoom hell is one I've learned. There's other things. So that's great. So I think at this point, I just want to thank everyone here for taking the time to talk with our students, and also a lot of alum, a lot of people working in the industry. And thank you for your time. Captain DePete, do you want to say some closing remarks?
Only to say this, obviously you can imagine what we deal with on a 24 basis, right? 24-hour basis. I gotta say most sincerely, and I think Costas knows this, and my hat goes off to Jim and your son for doing what you did here. Nothing gives me more pleasure than to do this, to be quite honest with you. I think it had a lot to do. I was a line check airman for a while, and when you're in that kind of environment, capturing I think the fascination and the energy when you first came into the industry, and to see the new groups of people coming in, the new generations of people coming in, I tell you, it really it puts everything into perspective in that long timeline of service that Jim was talking about earlier, in terms of where we find ourselves on this timeline of service at ALPA. I just really, truly have to tell you from the heart, I really enjoy this. And you're right, Costas, I can't wait to get back out on the road with you and come and visit the schools, because that last time we did that was truly outstanding. It was a great exchange with the students. Look forward to doing it. So with that, I thank you all for the opportunity to come here and speak to you today.
Thank you very much. And just as a reminder to everyone, this will be available on YouTube. I think maybe we can, for those that need to leave, can leave. Mike, I'm going to take you up on your offer if you want to just hang on for a few minutes and see if there are some other questions. Is that okay? I don't mean to be a bad crew scheduler.
Oh, absolutely. No.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get extended, and I won't
Okay.
I won't hit my 117 limits. So there you go.
Perfect.
I will take the offer. I need to depart.
Well,
I need to depart.
I might
The pad
leave
is here
because
right
I might
now,
leave
so
because I got to
will-
be.
Absolutely.
I'll stick
Well,
around
we might be
to
hitting our
Jim.
bandwidth issues here. So, okay, very good. Thanks, everyone. And I don't know if it's on my end, but it looks like we're running into some bandwidth issues here. So we'll do the best we can. Let's see. One of the questions at the very bottom here. I heard that United discussed with their United Express recovery plan doesn't include the 50-seat jets. How is United planning on going around scope clause? I don't know what that. You kind of get the gist of the question. Should I stay away from carriers that mainly fly 50-seat jets for United? Oh, great. The last part was a pretty interesting question, I think. So who wants to go after that
I think
one?
so. Yeah, I'll tackle that a little bit. That was an offhand remark by Scott Kirby during one of our town halls. I don't know if that is reality or not. I think they are, every airline I think is taking a step back and fully assessing their network, finding out what makes sense and what doesn't. 50-seat jets, quite frankly, economically, their economic viability is directly related to the cost of oil. So with oil where it is right now, 50 seat jets make a little bit more sense. 50 seat jet makes more sense when you're only flying 30% load factors. But we'll see. I'll have that answer in about 9 months. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It'd be easy if we could all forecast the future perfectly, right?
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, everyone's magic 8 ball says ask again later. So.
Right. Right. Okay. Let's see. Is it possible to look at the railway industry after the influenza outbreak to predict how the airline industry will recover after the COVID outbreak? That's a tough question. I don't know who wants to go after that. I'm not familiar with how the railway industry responded to influenza, so.
It's too bad Captain DePete left because he was alive back then. So.
Yeah. You know this is going on video. Yeah. Here's the only thing.
That'd be a tough one.
I think that question really. I think what the underlying current on that question is the speed at which airlines can spread virus. I think is going to maybe change how the international community looks at outbreaks. That was the big thing with the rail industry that, it can move a virus from A to B, and that's, from one city to the next in pretty short order. Airlines are even faster. As you saw, there was a rather large city in China that managed to infect the entire world largely because of air travel. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out. I think we're figuring out as we go, but we'll see going forward, how different countries deal with their borders and pandemics.
Okay. I think it's hard for me to clear some of these questions, but I think we're down to 2. Let's see. What are some of the long-term impacts of this pandemic? Do you expect new trends in how individuals decide to conduct business? For example, a larger number of businesses decide in the future to host more business meetings online. I think we might have already answered this a little bit. Rather than using the airlines, if so, are there any reliable estimates on the loss of future travelers? Costas, I think you already kind of tackled that one. I don't know if you want to talk to that, or anyone wants to add to that. I think we're good.
There's one thing I'd like to add to that.
Yeah, by all means.
There's a reason why a lot of business and conventions are conducted in places like Las Vegas and Orlando, is because people want to go there. They want to travel. They want to get together, and we're creatures of really social behavior. And the reason why we're able to live on this planet is because we have been like that for many, many thousands of years. And we developed that immunity because we are so close to one another. If we hand sanitize and mask ourselves into having no immunity, then we have bigger problems as a species than what we're going through right now. But I'm just a dumb pilot. I'm not an epidemiologist or a student of social behavior. That's just my opinion.
I think at the end of the day.
And yeah, one thing I would think to add is that there aren't any reliable statistics. I can't imagine right now. So it's just a guess. And I do agree that long-term people want to shake hands. People want to be in Las Vegas. So short-term, yes, we might, we are probably going to see a reduction, but not long-term. And there aren't any numbers out there.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. There isn't a good metric to go by or a forecast on how it's going to impact it. But if you think of yourself in a business dealing and you do a web meeting and someone's at the table meeting with someone, when Zoom turns off or your Citrix meeting turns off and someone's still at the table, who has the better bite at the apple at that point? There's an advantage to meeting with someone. There's a connection that's made. And I think I'm very confident that once people have the confidence to travel safely, we're going to see a comeback, and we're going to see people continue to do business the way we've seen our economy build up to this point.
All right. And I think the last question I have on the list is, with a significant number of retirements still on the horizon and the potential for a strong turnaround, what can be done to ensure the airlines have an adequate training capacity to ensure that does not become the limiting factor? And I don't know who wants to tackle that? Costas, you're on there. If you want to take the first stab.
I think everybody on here can give an interesting perspective on the training side. Up until now, airlines, if you think Delta, American, and United with pilot groups between 12 and 15,000, they've handled all of their recurrent events, their transition trainings, and hiring about 1,000 a year in addition to all that up until now. So we have an idea of where airlines can handle that. There's also maximums in the interviewing world as well. Don't forget that the interview teams can only handle so many interviews per week, per month, application reviews, and so forth. And so we have a pretty good idea of where that is. Airlines always get creative. There's ways to go to exterior training facilities. I know that at United, occasionally we've used offsite training facilities as overflow, so airlines can find a way. But Paul or Mike might have a more specific answer for you, but I guess what I'm trying to say is the airlines do try to adapt to what they see, and we can train a fairly large number of people. 1,000 a year is a lot of people.
Great.
Yeah, I think that from a national standpoint, our ability to maintain consistent throughput of high quality applicants is very strong. We've been doing an average of 5,000 new ATPs and restricted ATPs, despite having downturns in the early 90s, the late 90s, in the early 2000s, through a recession. We've maintained that average. I think that that's a testament to the resiliency of our system domestically. It's not the same internationally, and so I think international carriers are going to have a little bit more exposure to that. But domestically, Costas hit on our airlines have displayed the ability to train an incredible amount of pilots safely. Our flight academies, our universities have done an incredible job of producing high quality candidates, and our military produces a solid number as well, though we've moved as an industry away from really relying heavily on military only to really relying more on civilian training. And I think that system is more resilient than the military, which typically goes full throttle to idle, full throttle to idle, and it's around needs in times of war. It's dependent on appropriations and a lot of complex factors. But they're still producing about 24 to 2,200 pilots a year that were coming out into the civilian world. And so we benefit from a very robust supply of pilots from various streams at different varying points in time that offer resiliency. When civilian training is down, military training has historically gone up, and vice versa. So I think that all combined creates a really strong picture for us moving forward past the pandemic.
Great. Well, with that, I'd just like to go around, and if anyone has any closing comments, I'm just going to go as the tiles appear on my screen. So I'll start with you, Mike. Any closing comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's this industry. Welcome to the industry. This is it. When I graduated in '93, I graduated second in my class, had my MEI, and it took me 6 months to find a flight instructing job. So we've been a little spoiled here lately, where you get that 999th hour and you're starting your in-doc next week. We're getting a little more traditional. But at the end of the day, regardless of how long it takes you to get there, it's worth doing. This, flying a 777 over the polar ice cap on my way to Beijing you can't get that anywhere else. You can't get that in an office. This job it's worth the effort, so stick with it.
Outstanding. James?
My advice to anybody who's at UND or Embry-Riddle or FIT or Purdue is to get involved with that ACE program. And when you do that, go ahead and reach out to ALPA and come to our events. If you're anywhere near Oshkosh, not this year, obviously, but next year, go to Oshkosh. Come to our safety forum in Washington in the summertime when that's scheduled. And there are two things that pilots love to do and love to talk about. That's themselves and flying. So if you can reach out to an ALPA pilot, he'd be more than happy to talk to you about his career and how he did it or she did it. and they'll give you that advice, and take that advice and go forward. And you'll always have a friend in the industry to look up to and ask the questions to.
Very good. Amy?
I would just add, you know, keep the passion, do what you love. And like you said, this will never be a job. We'll get through this for sure. Good luck.
Great. Thank you. Costas?
I got my pilot's license in 2007, and back then a lot of people asked me why. No one was hiring, especially 2008 with the downturn. People wondered why I kept on training. And then in 2009, I started working very closely as a student with ALPA when we formed the ALPA ACE clubs, and ALPA's been a huge resource. So please use us. That's what we're here for. ALPA.org/scholarship. We want to help you get your flight training done. That's been extended until June 5th. And beyond that, I can tell you I grew up with my dad's side of the family from Greece, and flying on airplanes is what I always wanted to do. And to sit here, just like Mike said, the experiences you get at cruise, you can't get anywhere else, those viewpoints. I am unbelievably lucky that for the last 5 years, all I've known is flying to Europe. My kitchen right now has food and seasoning, spices, wines from overseas. And I'm going to treasure that. It'll go away for a little bit, but we'll be back. And you can't do that anywhere else. So keep the pedal to the metal, because I was training during the last downturn. And when it rebounds, you'll be able to ride the upswing.
Oh, very good. And last but not least, Paul.
Yeah, I think, everyone's said some incredible bits of advice, and I would just summarize it as approach your career like you would any flight. Make sure you know that there's going to be some turbulence ahead, and do what you can to mitigate that. Be prepared for an alternate. Expand your team. Build a network. Find all the information to be prepared for any abnormalities or any challenges that may come your way. If you approach your career the same way you would in preparing for a flight, I think you'll find that you're not going to have as many surprises. You might not know exactly where the thunderstorm is until you get a little closer and the radar shows you. But you're going to know that they're out there, and you're going to be prepared for them, and you're going to have a plan on how you're going to react to them. And know that the volunteers of the Airline Pilots Association are here to support you. And to Jim's point, we're part of the same family of aviation individuals who have a passion for what we do, and we're here to support you. And if we can find creative ways to do that, please let us know, because we're all about helping each other out. And I look forward to seeing everyone who's participating on the call at some point in a new hire class or flying with me at some point. And I wish you a lot of good luck.
Jim, if you don't mind, I'd like to give you an email. We mentioned that my son was the ALPA ACE president. Todd.Belton, Belton at UND.edu, and he'd love to hear from you if you want to join that club.
That's outstanding. I'm a big believer in the ACE Club, and I actually had a chance to speak in front of them not too long ago. I met your son. There is a mysterious comment that appeared from a Patrick Hamilton, mysteriously same last name as a Mike Hamilton. He just said he wanted to let you know, Mr. Belton, you liked your hair. So just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, well, it's all real, and his dad is jealous.
Oh, there you go. Outstanding.
I can't get it cut.
I just want to say,
nobody will cut it.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I just want to say thank you. This was tremendous. I know you're all very busy, but this is a highlight for us, and really, really appreciate the time. And your passion for each one of you that spoke is very clear, and really gives our students something to model after. So thank you all very, very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And